Good afternoon, everybody. I assume you're all here for a City of Cheyenne Public Services Committee meeting. Today is June 6, 2023. Many of you come to these meetings very frequently. Dr. Rini is here as well. Let the record reflect. We have a full committee. Just a few reminders for everybody. If you have a phone or a device with you today, if you would be kind enough to either shut it off or mute it during the meeting, we very much appreciate that. For those who are online, we also appreciate if you mute your device, mute yourself when you're not speaking out of respect for everyone else attending. Last reminder I will give, well, one of the last reminders I'll give, if you are here to make comment on a specific item on the agenda, do please come up to the podium, activate the microphone, identify who you are, so we're able to follow up with you if need be. And then just the last reminder is any public comment today in this meeting should be limited to items on the agenda. If you have public comment that is not related to an item on this agenda, it is certainly welcome at the full council meeting, the next one being next Monday. With that, Madam Clerk, item number 9, please.
Number 9, ordinance third reading, amending the official zoning map of the City of Cheyenne, changing the zoning classification from MR, medium density residential, to MUB, mixed use business emphasis for land located at lot 29, block 1, Eastridge.
Mr. Lloyd.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Seth Lloyd. I'm with the City of Cheyenne Planning and Development Department. The proposal in front of you proposes changing one lot along Pershing Boulevard right next to the roundabout from a residential zone district to a mixed use zone district, specifically MR to MUB. The MUB zone district would allow a variety of uses, which also includes single family residential, which is the development pattern of that property in question. There was a question at the last committee meeting about how much public comment we've received on this item. We did receive 2 neighbors speaking at the Planning Commission against the proposal, and one concerned member of the community who does not live in the area speaking against the proposal. And that was the extent of public comment. I have not received any other public comment via email, voicemail, phone call, etc. on this item since that meeting. And I have no other updates since our last city council meeting, but I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lloyd. Hold tight. Any questions from the committee for Mr. Lloyd?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Dr. Rini.
could you ask Mr. Lloyd what the nature of the opposition or the rationale for the opposition to the zone change was?
Mr. Lloyd.
Sure, Mr. Chair. There were concerns expressed by the ability of a mixed use business zone district of having high intensity commercial uses that would create traffic in the neighborhood. There was discussion about how during the site plan process, a high intensity commercial use would have to mitigate their traffic impacts. So if there was a high intensity traffic type use, they would have to submit a traffic transportation impact study, and that impact study would indicate what types of measures the city would have to take to mitigate those impacts. There's also some concern expressed about the gradual creep of commercial zoning into a residential area, which certainly is a legitimate concern, because let's say the next house goes and then the next house goes and the next house goes. So that is something to consider when considering this zoning map amendment. That is definitely a possibility, but our plan Cheyenne does encourage the conversion of homes that are facing major streets like this to convert into office uses or other commercial uses. So it's a dichotomy that you have to weigh which one you would like to go to, but that was with the concerns expressed at the meeting.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lloyd. Go ahead and follow up. Dr. Rini.
My understanding is this is just going to be a business office. Is that considered high intensity?
Mr. Chair, the proposed use associated with the zoning map amendment would not be high intensity. It would be a pretty light intensity use. However, by zoning MUB, you could have a whole bunch of different uses go to that location.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further questions for Mr. Lloyd from the committee? No. Mr. Hanson, I believe this is your project. If you wanted to make any comments.
Good afternoon, Shane Hanson, Style Surveying Services. Nothing's changed. Still, the plan is for a low impact rental service out of there for handicap accessible vehicles. I'll take any questions anyone may have.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hanson. Any questions from the committee for Mr. Hanson? Seeing and hearing none. Thank you. Any further public comment from here in the room on item number 9? Do we have any raised hands? All right. All right, with that, the chair would entertain a motion. Moved by Mr. Laybourne, seconded by Mr. Seagrave. Any further questions or comments, discussion from the committee?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Mr. Laybourne.
well, this is a difficult one and one that has a lot of considerations at other sites and areas. Certainly, the conversion of homes into businesses is sometimes destructive to the neighborhood, and sometimes it isn't. I think that my justification in this case is the roundabout itself and the commercial businesses that surround it, and the fact that this is going to be implementing an existing parking lot. So it's not probably what the neighbors think is ideal, but I think the overall benefit in use is reasonable. Of course, I can't predict what it'll be like in 20 years. But in this case, I believe it is justified. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Laybourne. Last call for questions or comments from the committee. All right. All those in favor? Those opposed? The recommendation for next Monday's city council meeting will be for approval of this ordinance on third reading. Item number 10, please.
Number 10, ordinance third reading, amending the major street plan official map 2017 by updating the entire major street plan official map with newly platted and built roads and with the most recent master transportation plan, Connect 2045, and other recently adopted master transportation amendments.
Mr. Mason, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members, Tom Mason with the Cheyenne Metropolitan Planning Organization. This ordinance is amending the current city's official map. Since we have, the governing body has adopted a new master transportation plan and 2 other sets of amendments. So with those amendments and the new master plan, we're updating the city's official map. Answer any other questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Mason. I appreciate that. Rather short report. Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee for Mr. Mason? Mr. Laybourne, go ahead.
Mr. Mason, so could you run us through the public process that led to this in the variety of issues and activities and areas that were built, platted, or coming into use? And was there any comment at the planning commission?
Mr. Chairman, my recollection from the planning commission, there were no public comments to the proposed ordinance and the official map. However, the master plan itself went through a huge public input process to develop the new master transportation plan, which was adopted by the governing body December of 2020. And then dates listed on the ordinance listed the resolutions and dates that the governing body made some amendments to the master transportation plan. And so those, the future functional classification of the master transportation plan is laid over the existing city platted roads. And it shows what our proposed function, future functional classification of the roadways will be. And in some cases where it's not a platted road, the city governing body has adopted some official map amendments by adopting surveyed center line alignments for future roads. And those are also placed on the official map.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Mason? Thank you. Any public comment? Public comment? Are there any hands raised? Anybody online? Okay. Then may I have a motion?
So move.
Second. Discussion? Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The recommendation will be to approve on third. Next item, please.
Number 12, ordinance second reading, creating chapter 2.96 ethical obligations of public officials, public members, and city employees of Title II Administration and Personnel of the Municipal Code of the City of Cheyenne, Wyoming, specifying the ethical duties and obligations of public officials, public members, and employees of the City of Cheyenne.
Is there a staff report?
Good afternoon, members of the Public Service Committee. I'm Dr. Michelle Aldrich. I'm City Councilwoman in Ward 3. And as the author and sponsor of this, not the author, but the sponsor of this proposed ordinance, I wanted to come before you and give you the report and how this came about. While attending the Wyoming Association of Municipalities Conference in February that was held here in Cheyenne, I attended a newly elected officials boot camp, the first to be held in a couple of years by WAM at their conference. And a comment was made by one of the presenters that, of course, all of you have your conflict of interest ordinance, right? And I thought, I've never seen a conflict of interest ordinance. So I contacted our city attorney, Stephanie Boster, and after visiting with her, discovered that we did not have an ordinance in the Cheyenne City municipal code that covered conflicts of interest for elected officials and our board members, known as public members in this proposed ordinance. And so according to Wyoming statute 15-1-127C, Mr. Brody was kind enough to do some research on this and put together this proposed ordinance, much of which has come out of Casper's ordinance that they have implemented in to address this Wyoming statutory requirement. There is, it was brought to our attention that there are some concerns because there are some references to employees, which would require some changes in our employee handbook, unless we were to grandfather in employees prior to this passage. And that would, if we don't grandfather those existing employees in, they would be impacted by this proposed ordinance if it were to pass. So we do have a substitution that Mr. Brody has worked on that we would be able to bring forward if that's the desire of your committee. But I would stand for any questions that you have.
Thank you. Any questions for the sponsor? The chair does have some questions, but I'll let you gentlemen ask them first.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Dr. Rennie.
can the councilwoman or Mr. Brody compare this to state statute, which we've been operating successfully under for several years? So is this any different from state statute? Does it just codify what's in state statute? Is it more stringent than state statute? So can either of you address that, please?
Do you want to go ahead? I was going to say it codifies what's in state statute, but it does define, add more definition to that.
Mr. Brody, please, floor is yours.
Yeah, John Brody, Deputy City Attorney. State statute in large part prescribes the conduct of elected and appointed officials. The statute that Dr. Aldrich references requires the imposition of conflict of interest ordinance prescribing limitations on what city employees can do. So this sort of touches both worlds in that it's somewhat more prescriptive and belt and suspenders when it comes to elected and appointed members. And then it provides clarification on conflicts of interest as they apply to city employees.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead for follow-up.
So then comparing this to our personnel handbook and personnel rules and regulations, is this a necessary addition, or has that been covered in our personnel rules and regulations?
Mr. Chairman, honestly, that's a policy decision. It conflicts with certain provisions of the current employee manual. And it is more prescriptive in certain respects. And then it touches other areas of interest that I think the employee handbook is silent on. So whether that's a good decision or a bad decision is certainly a decision in front of this committee.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Brody. Yes, Dr. Rennie.
So with this being an ordinance, any violation of it is, I presume, a misdemeanor. So is that the intent that if there is a violation found, what's the process for determining who's going to find that there's a violation, and is the penalty, if it is a misdemeanor, is such violations subject to the normal $750 up to $750 fine and 6 months in jail?
Well, Chairman Cook, through you to
Go ahead.
Councilman Rennie. If you'll notice on page 4 of the proposed ordinance, it does talk about violations, and that any violation would be cause for termination of a person's employment or censure. It does not in effect, according to this proposed ordinance, a misdemeanor charge.
Mr. Chairman, for our attorney, though, is a violation of an city ordinance a misdemeanor?
Mr. Brody.
Yes, under the city code, if a provision within the municipal code doesn't specify a penalty, then the general penalty would apply. I can't say from a sort of a boots on the ground perspective. I can't envision the city attorney's office filing a criminal complaint to prosecute a city employee. The behavior would have to be pretty egregious. So I guess never say never, but for example, the current proposal talks about how a city employee shouldn't be managing or supervising an immediate family member. I think in large part, we would exercise prosecutorial discretion and not prosecute for that type of violation.
Mr. Chairman,
Dr. Rennie.
on page 4, 2.96.060 says that a violation could result in the removal of a public official. Wyoming has no recall provisions. How can a violation of a city ordinance result in the removal of a public official?
Mr. Chairman, that's really belt and suspenders, to be quite honest. The fact that it says it may result in that just leaves the avenue open if there are other legal avenues available under statute or otherwise that would come into play for the removal or termination of someone.
Go ahead.
How can you remove a public official other than, I mean, even I think if we were convicted of a felony, we'd have to resign our position. So I'm just curious, and I don't see, at least in the introductory paragraph, I don't see where it says may. It just says that it will result in may constitute cause for termination of employment, for censure, or removal of the official. So it doesn't say you may remove them.
Well, that's the operative word there at the beginning of the provision is it may constitute it. Just as it
Okay.
may constitute it, just as likely may not. So again, that's sort of just a umbrella provision to more of a notice provision, I'd say, than anything, that if you violate this ordinance, should it go forward, that it could constitute a basis for terminating your employment. If there's other avenues available either now or in the future that would allow for removal of a public member, then those are in play as well. It wouldn't stand in the way.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further questions from the committee for either Dr. Aldrich or Mr. Brody? If the committee will allow, Mr. Brody, and Dr. Aldrich, the chair did have a question. Mr. Brody, I think you had mentioned, and I'm not sure I have your exact language, but I believe you had mentioned that the statute that's in question that Dr. Aldrich that you're referring to. I believe, Mr. Brody, you stated something like, and maybe I misunderstood you. That's why I would like you to restate it. From what I recollect, you basically stated that the statute in reference basically mandates that we have an ordinance like this. Can I get some clarification on that? And if so, it's 2023. Why have we never had one?
Mr. Chairman, I can't speak to that latter question. I merely assisted Dr. Aldrich in putting this proposal together. I can say that the statute that was referenced is 15-1-127C. It's an affirmative obligation on the city of Cheyenne and all other municipalities to pass an ordinance governing conflicts of interest for employees. The rest of the ordinance it's broader than that, and that's just the result of the broader conversation I had with Dr. Aldrich, and that all sort of actors within city government should be governed by some sort of conflict of interest.
Follow-up question. Sorry. Follow-up question, Mr. Brody, if I may. And maybe either one of you, frankly, the statute in reference, when was it enacted?
Mr. Chairman, I do not know.
And then
Not
is
off the top of
this, and then follow up to that, Mr. Brody, is this the same? It sounded like there might have been two different state statutes that govern conflict of interest, or is there just one?
Well, there's a multitude, to be quite honest. There's conflict of interest provisions governing the DDA, for example. There's conflict of interest provisions governing public contracts.
Okay.
There's conflict of interest provisions governing elected members under Title IX. So really, it's dependent on the specific actor within government.
Right. But you, to your recollection, and Dr. Aldrich, you're not aware of how long this statute has been on the books,
Chairman
been
Cook.
enforceable?
Chairman Cook, I'm not, it was just presented as a given that, of course, all of us knew this as municipality representatives and elected officials. And that's when I began to question whether we had one or not.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Brody. I appreciate your answers as well. Appreciate that. Any further questions from the committee for either Dr. Aldrich or Mr. Brody before I go to public comment? Okay. Madam Clerk, do we have any raised hands online? Are there any further public comment within the room here?
Vicki Nemechek, Public Works. I'd just like to say that I believe it's important that we grandfather in the people that are affected by the nepotism rule. We currently I only have one person in my department, but I understand that there are several others in other departments. The employee handbook currently says that you can't directly or indirectly supervise an immediate member of your family. And the immediate member of the family is defined differently in the employee handbook than it is in this ordinance. I would appreciate the grandfathering, and I would also appreciate if all of the information was the same in all of these locations.
Same definitions,
Correct.
which it
Also,
be.
the amount of the gifts, for example, in this ordinance recommends $250. In our employee handbook, it's says 25. There are a few conflicts in the ordinance and the employee handbook.
Thank you, Director. Any questions for Director Nemechek? Thank you. Mr. Lloyd, I'm assuming you're wanting to come in on this issue.
Yes, I'm here for public comment. My name is Seth Lloyd. I'm a city employee. I'm representing only myself as a city employee, but I'm a little bit concerned about the language of advocating for family members for employment and exactly how that is meant to read. I can understand, let's say I have a teenage child who would like to have a summer job. If I tell Jason Sanchez with the Parks Department, hey, hire my daughter, I can understand that being a little bit of an issue. But if I tell my daughter, hey, there's a position open with the city, maybe you should apply for it, would that be considered a violation of this ordinance? Because I'm advocating for my daughter to be employed by the city, even though she would go through the normal process that all of my other, everybody else in the community would go through. So I'm a little bit concerned about the phraseology of that advocation clause, and maybe it needs to be cleaned up a little bit. Just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lloyd. Any further public comment from the room on this proposed ordinance on second reading? Seeing and hearing none, the chair would entertain a motion at this time. We have a motion by Mr. Laybourne. Do we have a second? Seconded by Dr. Rennie. Further questions, comments, concerns from the committee?
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Mr. Laybourne.
Well, this is certainly a complex but important issue. Living as we do right now in the golden age of cynicism towards government, I think it's important that we make an effort to spell out and understand what conflict of interest is and how it can affect our city government, and how we have policies and ordinance to give people good reference as to what is a conflict and what is not. Because there, in my experience in the past, people have, and of course, it's totally legitimate that a member of the governing body could and is free to declare a conflict whenever and however they see it. But that can get pretty confusing. And so I think that when we look at the positive responsibility here that our Assistant City Attorney mentioned, it's important that we work through these issues. And I think that in the past and certainly over the years, I am aware of how we have believed that the state statute covered this issue. Well, that state statute is utterly toothless. And any sort of actions in the state of Wyoming in general never seem to get to the heart of the matter of people who are abusing their power. And certainly I remember how a number of these issues were raised in Casper when they had a city councilman who was elected, who was an asphalt contractor and who really had a difficult time. And the city had a difficult time, a lot of lawsuits, a lot of controversies. And from what I read, pretty obvious that a member of the city council should not be bidding and being awarded contracts for road work. But I think that that possibility certainly exists. And I believe that we should move this forward with the understanding that the purpose of this committee is to review the matter and try to determine what we need to do and how we need to do it. And obviously, there are questions here in the proposed substitute. So I believe that we should proceed with this because it is more important than to leave up to the individual. This should be a city law. And that law should be clear. I think that there's a lot here. I'm not sure that we all have gone through it to the degree that we thoroughly understand it, but of course, that's the process that we are going through right now. So I absolutely speak in favor of this. It's something I think we all experience, that there is great distrust of us and what we do. And it is our responsibility take positive action to demonstrate that. And I believe that the explanation we received as to the complaint is reasonable. And the fact that if we're talking about some sort of crime, that's handled in other ways, but definitely could and should be discussed through this mechanism. So I hope we'll move this along and continue this discussion because it is a very important one. Thank you.
Further questions or comments from the committee? Okay. All those in favor? Those opposed? And the chair will not vote as even an affirmative vote would still result in a tie. So there would be no recommendation regardless. So the recommendation, well, there is no recommendation moving forward to next Monday night on this ordinance on second reading. Item number 18, please, Madam Clerk.
Number 18, resolution approving water services by outside user agreement for properties to be known as Iron Horse Third Filing, Laramie County, Wyoming, generally located southeast of the West Riding Club Road and Hines Boulevard.
Mr. Lloyd.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Seth Lloyd. I'm with the City of Cheyenne Planning and Development Department. The proposal in front of you at this time is to do an outside users agreement to allow city water to be used outside of the city limits for a development. Specific development has in mind the development of residential units, and the mayor commissioned a report from the University of Wyoming to determine the feasibility of what it would cost or benefit the city to have new increase the density of residential units outside of the city limits. So there are some costs associated with that. For example, decreased tax revenues. For any tax revenue that's based on population, we would decrease tax revenues there. We also wouldn't get the property taxes from residential development. But on the benefits side, they would have an area where we don't have to pay as much for the infrastructure, or we'd have more residents generally in the county, which means more people working at jobs and doing things like that. So there's a lot of factors that come into play when it comes to considering this. The net effect is negative for the city based on the analysis by the University of Wyoming. However, I believe the applicant would desire to look at options to maybe reduce that deficit and still have this development go forward in some fashion by reducing that deficit to the city and making that happen. With that being said, it is staff's understanding that the applicant is looking to postpone this item to kind of look at some options in that regard. I'm available for questions. We also have representatives from the Board of Public Utilities and some of my coworkers here for question purposes as well. So if you have questions or concerns, I'm available, and some of my coworkers are as well.
Thank you, Mr. Lloyd. Before I move to other folks, any questions for Mr. Lloyd?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Laybourne.
Mr. Lloyd, what sort of postponement are we talking about?
Mr. Chair, we're not certain as to the length of the postponement, what it will take. But generally the council only postpones the items for 2 weeks at a time. So it might be one postponement, it might be multiple postponements, but at this time, we're just asking for the standard 2-week postponement. I shouldn't speak for the applicant. It's our understanding the applicant would be only requesting a 2-week postponement because that's our standard.
Can the applicant speak to that?
Yeah, we're gonna. Actually,
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
go ahead.
Our city attorney determined a few years back that we can only do 2-week postponements.
Okay. All right. Actually, Mr. White, I see that you're going to have some comments, but I need to allow the developers an opportunity before I let you speak. Go ahead, Mr. Lloyd, if you have a follow-up.
I do not, I'm just here in case there's other questions.
I do agree with Dr. Rennie, though, that I believe that we had been advised that we can only do postponements in 2-week increments. So I have that recollection as well.
Mr. Chairman, again, kind of to the point of order and thinking about it, we can table something. We don't normally do that because it requires a certain date and then a motion at that time to take it off the table. So
All right.
we've not done that by practice, but Robert's rules does allow it.
Thank you, Mr. Lloyd. Did you have anything further? Mr. Palma, and then I believe the other gentleman associated with the development here as well. So go ahead.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members of the committee, Casey Palma, Palma Land Planning, agent for the owner. As you noted, there are owner representatives here that I think they'd like to maybe say a few words as well. And just for a little background, I mean, this project was conceived in the face of rampant county development, primarily in the form of 5-acre sprawl. We're seeing more and more how that's starting to contain the annexable boundaries of the city. And it's just moving further and further north. I'm sure you've seen some of the stuff, 15, 20, 30 minutes outside of Cheyenne. And so, a group of local investors thought that we, being the city, the county, and local developers could come up with a better solution for smart growth in and around Cheyenne. So that's how we landed here today. We have submitted and had an approved PDP at the county. Their condition that they applied was they would prefer to see this project move forward, not on a community well, but utilizing water from the Board of Public Utilities. And so we had ended up meeting yesterday with representatives of the city and the Board of Public Utilities and talked about sort of some of the concerns that had been expressed previously about OUAs really generally on principle. Some of the items that Mr. Lloyd noted. And I think it was a very productive discussion. I think there may be a way for, to kind of protect the city as county growth on the urban fringe is ramping up more and more. And the percentage of the county population is being higher and higher outside of the city with only so much infill opportunity within the city limits. Board of Public Utilities, in terms of extending their infrastructure, sees projects like this as fine if they're not having to own and maintain all of this infrastructure, reaching out into the county. And likewise, an annexation of these types of properties would really burden city services, fire, police, roads, and water and sewer infrastructure. And so, we think, we've worked really hard to put together a quality project that addresses all of the federal and state level regulatory environments and approvals. And, we just have worked really hard over the past 3 years to figure out, what would make the most sense for everybody involved, including the city. So I think that upon review and discussion, what this OUA gives you all in the city of Cheyenne and the Board of Public Utilities, really an ability to protect the city's interest as growth on the urban fringe is happening, as opposed to it just happening in the county without any oversight from the city. And so, we, as Mr. Lloyd noted, I think we probably would be well advised to postpone this for at least 2 weeks, as we kind of work with staff and work with members of the governing body and other interested parties on what that looks like. This can really be a case study for how to do responsible development in and around municipalities. And like I said, I think it's really an opportunity for the city to protect their interests as opposed to just letting development in the county run rampant without any city involvement. So I think it's the best thing for everybody involved. And I'd love to have some more discussions about that, either today or offline or in 2 weeks, as we've all had a chance to kind of digest some of this stuff. So I'd be happy to address any questions you might have. And as I mentioned, the owner's rep is here. I think they'd like to say a few words. And then following that in public comment, we'd respectfully request a postponement for 2 weeks to kind of hash through some of that.
Questions? Thank you, Casey. Questions for Mr. Palma before we speak to the owners?
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Dr. Reed.
So we're looking at a total of 33 residences, is that correct?
That's correct. The district has 37, excuse me, Mr. Chair, through you, the district has 37 total lots and we're proposing 30
Right.
new build lots.
Okay, and my understanding is you're gonna do a connection from Board of Public Utilities lines, but it would be is it maintained by an HOA? My perception is it's something similar to Southside Sewer and Water. And that we deliver the water to a certain point and then the development takes over from there. Is that accurate?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, through you to Councilman Rennie, I didn't want to delve too much into details. There's a statutorily approved service and improvement district, Iron Horse Service Improvement District. They've had elections. There is a sitting board. And that district would be responsible for all oversight, ownership and maintenance of the system. It's what's known as a consecutive system. So there would be a single point of purchase at which BOPU would meter the water leaving their system. Iron Horse would pay the Iron Horse service, the district itself would pay the 150% of the standard BOPU rate for whatever water flows out of their system. And then beyond that, it's all their responsibility.
Further questions from the committee for Mr. Palmer? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you. My name is Matt Kaufman. I'm an attorney here in town with Hathaway and Coons. With me is Tyler Garrett. We're a few of the owner members of this property. I won't repeat what Mr. Palma said. He did a great job of summarizing, but I do just want to hammer home that when we set out to do this 3 years ago, and over the last few years, I've met and spoke with many of you about this project. The vision here is extending just what Casey said, some slightly higher density residential development to outside of the bounds of the city of Cheyenne. Obviously, the land use regulations permit that, but we have to identify a public water source. And we're going through that process with the county now as to whether or not that can be a locally sourced, service well, or whether it has to be an outside user agreement with the city. As Mr. Palma just indicated, the county has taken a position that their preference would be an outside user agreement. All the representations about the size of the development are accurate. Just for your information, from the Vanda High exit roundabout, we are about exactly 1/2 mile to the north, right up Hines Boulevard. There's about a 78 acre open spot there, and that's the parcel we're talking about. And as Mr. Palma said, we did go to the trouble of setting up an improvement and service district and have that fully formed for the sole purpose of owning this water infrastructure. We didn't believe that, that was appropriate for us as developers to own it, but also two, we foresaw that there was going to have to be obligations going forward with respect to maintenance, because BOPU's expression that's not something that they want to take on. So this would be a consecutive system. It would just service those. And as we know also, planning for the future, we know that there may well be problem lots and houses out to the north. The Water Development Commission, others that we've spoken to assure us that this is a logical solution. This makes sense from a planning perspective. And so that's why we're here today. The reason for the postponement, Mr. Chairman, is we had this meeting yesterday, and obviously we've been at this for almost 3 years. But we had a meeting yesterday with the mayor, members of the Board of Public Utilities, County Assessor's Office, just to explore this question of how could we potentially build an assessment that would potentially satisfy the mayor and others' concerns about the offset. We need just a little bit of time to flesh that out. That study obviously just came out. We had this meeting yesterday. So to say today that we have a solution for you with respect to that assessment wouldn't be fair. So we just need a little time to develop that and come back to you all with a little more full discussion. With that, I'll stand for any questions, but thank you.
Questions from the committee for Mr. Kaufman? So you would be in support of a postponement?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. All right. Mr. Garrett, you are here. Did you want to offer anything in addition? I just thought I'd offer that. Okay, I'll open it up to public comment. Mr. White, you were first. I'll give you the floor for the initial public comment.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, Michael White. I had the privilege of attending the planning commission. And the users agreement was one of the stipulations that they would approve of this project going forward. One of my main concern was the amount of water that the other individuals in that area would be using if there was a well. This developer's done a real good job. He's tried to go through the state statute requirements for the state engineer. The well permit was approved in December of 2022. The main opposition that I heard at the planning commission were the people that were concerned about their wells. So by doing a users agreement with the Board of Public Utilities, which I believe is the only option that would be feasible, it would help them out. It would help the project out. Currently, I visited with Mr. Strong that works for the Board of Public Utilities. I went over with all the calculations that they figured out on the amount of water they would need, the project would need, fire protection, you name it. And the line that would be coming from the Vanda High area would be substantial to meet the requirements of the developer. I speak in favor of a postponement, so we actually understand the realm of what the city's looking at, but thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. White. Any further public comment from here within the room? Seeing and hearing none, do we have any raised hands, Madam Clerk? Okay. All right, at this time, the chair would entertain a motion on this proposed resolution.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve.
Moved by Dr. Rennie,
We can't postpone it till it's on the table, gentlemen.
Second,
seconded by Mr. Laybourne. Mr. Chair, conversation, go ahead, Mr. Seagrave.
I vote, I'm sorry. I am not interested in a postponement because the issue on the table for the postponement doesn't affect my decision on this. I'm not, first of all, I'm opposed to this, not because of the financial side of it. I'm opposed to it for the lack of water based in the current system. Let me explain that. We all received this report dated May 25th from the Board of Public Utilities. In this report, the director, Mr. Brooks, talks about several very, very important things. Pro Basin is fully melted out as of May 25th. It does not have the water resources that the rest of the state does right now. He further talks about the Colorado River Compact and the requirement to conserve 2 to 4 million acre feet, 2 to 4 million acre feet of water. He talks about the city, the BOPU, spending a tremendous amount of money, total yet unknown, to acquire an additional 6,000 acre feet. Why would we acquire 6,000 acre feet if we have an adequate water supply? It doesn't make any sense. For us to talk to these folks about perpetual water, we're not talking about a year or 5 years or 10 years like the commercial project we approved. This is forever. These folks are going to expect water for the next 150 years. I don't think we have the ability to provide that. Look at the other things that the Board of Public Utility has done. They have spent a tremendous amount of money on a conservation specialist. They are doing everything we can. We are changing city code to conserve water. And here we have an outside user asking to use our limited water resources. It makes no sense to grant this. We are changing our water landscapes, looking at legacy landscapes. Microsoft Corporation is offering free water conservation kits. We're changing the unified development. We're in the process of changing the unified development code. I've been very upfront with this development group and the others that have approached the city. I am very much opposed to any outside user agreement. I just don't think we have the foresight to grant water for the next 100 years. I look at the South Side Water and Sewer District and the decisions that were made roughly 50 years ago. I'm not sure too many of us are really happy that that occurred. I look at the people in the city of Cheyenne have paid for this massive system. We bring water from over 100 miles away to supply the city, not outside users. So I am opposed to this request. I also note that the staff is opposed to this request. Page 1 does not approve, recommends the governing body not approve the resolution. So to go for a 2-week postponement to allow them to look at financial opportunities to support the city, that would be disingenuous on my part. So I'm going to be against the postponement as well as against the request. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Seagrave. Further comments from the committee?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Laybourne.
there's a lot to digest here. This is perhaps you'd call it a watershed moment. This
Pardon the
is
pun.
something that I look back on with a lot of experience. And a lot of that experience is on 201 agreements and outside users of areas immediately surrounding the city and the difficulty of those individuals to live in their home. So when you look at something of this magnitude, I think we really need to think about it and look at the bigger picture that I'm unfortunately not hearing today from the advocates of this project. And that is the future of the Colorado River. I'm sure we're all pleased that we've been getting moisture and that our reservoirs are filling or full. I think that's great. But when we're talking about our water system, we're talking about long term. And certainly my colleague here just mentioned Southside Sewer and Water District. Now, I haven't had the opportunity yet. I look forward to doing it, certainly possibly during this postponement, to visit with the staff at the Board of Public Utilities, because I think we all know, although I don't know the exact figure, I know from looking at the growth and development that is going on in that district is frankly amazing to me. I mean, it is complexes of the college. There's tremendous growth going on in the South Cheyenne Sewer and Water District, and we don't have any way to ever back out of that. And so I think that certainly a postponement is in order, but there's really more a thoughtful approach that's in order. And I understand some of the benefits that are brought forward here. Certainly, if this would have been 10 years ago or 15 years ago, I think it'd be a different matter. Today, and I'm certainly no legal expert or water expert, but I think everyone in this room and everyone probably that is awake in the city of Cheyenne knows that we have a very unique water system that is based on western slope water in the Colorado Basin. That is also water that is very important to Las Vegas, Phoenix, Los Angeles. And when we look at that, we see that it is not like it used to be. That those effects of climate change are profound, they are ongoing, and we have to deal with it. And one of the things that was briefly mentioned here that I'm also very interested in discussing with the staff of the Board of Public Utilities is the question of purchase of other water, which we've heard a lot about with the gold mine. So I'm not sure how that's going or how we could look at some numbers there to figure it out, but we're not the only ones looking for more water. There's municipalities, there's businesses, there's profound corporate interests here. They're looking for more water too. And obviously the conservation measures that we're talking about are not it's just really difficult to cut back. It is really difficult for a municipality to decrease in it. And I certainly applaud every effort that the board is making to do that. But when you're talking about really serious cutbacks, and I think we all ought to consider this, they can come. And if that curtailment ever happens, where do we go from there? And finally, I want to mention all the annexations we've been doing lately. I believe that a city needs to grow. I believe that we have absorbed and annexed in the past few years, certainly in my lifetime, unprecedented amount of acreage. We have constantly using our economic development agency to seek more business, particularly we're seeing a lot of those data centers that are water dependent. And although they're doing their conservation part too, I think it'd be really irresponsible for us to pass this without a really good understanding of what is coming down the road and what the reality is. I just have to say, any of us who don't understand climate change or are deniers or unconvinced, go out on Happy Jack Road and go to the NCAR Center, the National Center for Atmospheric Research, and delve a little bit into their reports. And you can do that at Atmos News is their site. So we are actually in a city-supported, state-supported area of great knowledge about how serious this condition is. And I'm sorry to say, under other conditions, this might be a good idea. It isn't anymore. And so I speak in favor of the postponement so we can have continuing understanding and discussion about this, because I think this is probably, if not the most important decision we make during my term of office. It's close. And we really should learn from the outside user agreements we have had and the fact that we haven't done anything like this. And it's unfortunate that that area of the county grew the way it did, and that those people are dependent on ever deeper wells. That's too bad. I wish it wouldn't have happened, but that's not our responsibility. That's the fact. So, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the opportunity here. Obviously, I feel very strongly about this. I think the entire community needs to understand and think about this. The development community, the households, and really face the fact that we are unique, in my experience, in that importation of that water the way we do, and the fact that that faucet can be shut. And if it happens, it's shut for everybody. So I think this postponement is in order, and I look forward to discussion and learning about this, but I'm certainly unconvinced at this point that we can sustain this. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just to be clear, we don't have a postponement on the table, so I just want to be clear.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Right.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Seagrave.
one more thing I wanted to share, and I forgot, I apologize. We are all aware that should this be approved, there is another larger outside users agreement coming right behind it. My understanding is it's in excess of 200 units. And legally, if we approve this one and deny that one, I really believe the city could have some exposure. So while this is the decision in front of us today, I think we also have to look down the road at what else is coming at us and what our legal position should be. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, we have the original. I just wanted to make sure,
No,
Dr.
it's-
Rennie, that we have the original. We
Nope,
do
I was
have a
gonna make-
motion and a
yep.
second.
I'd like to make a motion to postpone for
right.
2 weeks at the applicant's request.
We have a motion to postpone for 2 weeks from Dr. Rennie. Do we have a second?
Mr. Chair.
Seconded by Mr. Laybourne. Comments related to the postponement.
Yes, sir. The reason or the reason presented for the postponement is not for additional research into our water supplies. It's for the financial reimbursement of the city. That's what was discussed. They met with the mayor yesterday. So if in fact, the reason some members are wanting to postpone is to talk to the BOPU about water issues, that's not the reason they asked for the postponement. So I think we need to keep the reason in mind as we vote for this 2-week postponement.
Thank you. Mr. Seagrave, any further questions or comments from the committee related to the postponement? All right. All those in favor? Those opposed?
No.
Dr. Rennie? Sorry. She may have seen it. I didn't see it. Thank you. This matter, the recommendation will be for this matter to be postponed for 2 weeks at next Monday's city council meeting. And with that, no other business. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Sorry.